Chapter 26 A Poem for Aki-Hime. On our way back to Iwamura, I had several conversations with Lord Zakoji. He was well read, not only in Buddhist sages, but in literature too. He declared that he never wrote poetry because he had too great a respect for those who wrote well to insult them by making clumsy imitations. I did not believe him, but felt certain that in secret drawers of his writing desk at home there would be some poems, and they would neither be badly composed nor badly written, for he was famous for his calligraphy. He opened to me a world that was so different from the rough and all too ready world of the young samurai, where physical fitness counts for everything. I liked his gentle ways, the little rituals that formed part of his life. Even during our journey he drank his tea from exquisite cups that his servant carried in a little wooden box. His dainty, almost feminine habits were not laughed at, for Lord Zakoji sat well in his saddle and was known as one of the most accomplished swordsmen in Japan. He once let me hold one of his swords, a great honor. It was heavier than most, and the hilt was inlaid with gold. It had been made by a great master of the art, a famous sword maker of Kyoto. I think Lord Zakoji owned nothing that was not valuable. Even his combs were not wooden like mine, but were made of tortoiseshell, their tops framed in silver. Once we were back in Iwamura Castle, I was eager to continue my friendship with Lord Zakoji, but many weeks passed before I saw him again. Lady Toyama became the wife of Lord Akiyama in a simple ceremony held in a little Hachiman shrine outside the castle. No feast was held, and only a few gifts were given to the highest-ranking samurai. I had confessed to my friend Yoshiroki my feelings for Lord Zakoji's daughter. He made fun of me good-naturedly, and I felt sure that he thought my case too hopeless, my rank too low, for such aspirations. The result was that I dared not speak to anyone else about it. Well, that's not quite true. I had spoken to my servant, Yoichi. He was so loyal that he thought no woman in Japan too highly placed for me, and it was through him that I made contact with Aki. The samurai and lords are like trees, and their servants are like the roots. The trees stand apart from each other, their branches may not even touch, and yet their roots are entangled. We had not been back very long before Yoshiroki was detailed to form part of an escort that was to take a boy held hostage at Iwamura to Kofuchu. The 8-year-old boy was called Gobo. He was the fifth and youngest son of Oda Nobunaga. He was a likable little fellow. I hoped they would treat him well at Tsuchigasaki Castle. I rode along part of the way the first day. The boy was mounted on a small horse, and he was already an accomplished rider. As we parted, I rather envied my friend his commission, for I was back in the stores of the castle, working with Watakansuke. I took my time riding back. It was a lovely day, and soon the cherry blossom would be out in Kofuchu. For no reason at all, my thoughts turned to Lord Takeda. We had not heard any news for weeks, and I felt certain that before the new leaves formed on the trees, he would be dead. Now that his soul was ready to depart on the last journey it makes without the body, did he think of his son who he condemned to death? I shook my head and kicked my horse into a gallop to get rid of such thoughts. I had a tiny room of my own in one of the lesser buildings of the castle. Yoichi made my food, and although he was no great cook, he was an accomplished fisherman, and I would often have trout or some other fish for my supper. That particular evening the fish was large, and I complimented him on it. Kneeling down beside my little table, he bobbed his head up and down, pleased by my compliments. "Master," he said, "I have talked to someone who serves Lord Zakoji. He is a servant of no importance, or he would not have deigned talk to me. But he does know of the serving women, and would be willing, through her, to pass a message to the high-born young lady." I laughed, but turned the idea over in my mind. I could write a letter, or, better, a poem, and send it to her. I did not feel sure I could write anything worthy of her. Nevertheless, no sooner had I eaten than I brought out my inkstone, brush, and paper. I made several attempts before I was satisfied, and then I wrote it out carefully, making my letters at least distinct, if not beautiful. The buds on the plum tree contain the hope of spring. Born in winter and alone, I long to see them unfurled. I gave the poem to Yoichi that very evening. As soon as it was out of my hand, I decided it was a very poor poem. Born in winter and alone made me seem pathetic, and yet it was true. Or was it? True, I had no parents to love me, no mother to spoil me, but others had been kind. Would she not feel contempt rather than love, and did I not deserve it for writing so foolish a poem? All that night such thoughts kept me from sleeping, and it was not until the light of dawn that I had begun to paint the mountains that I fell asleep. The next day, a writer appeared with a message for Lord Aki-Hime, bidding him to come to Komaba. Lord Takeda Shingen was resting in a temple there on his way back to Kofuchu. The messenger looked so stern that no one dared approach him, but the expression on his face was an ill omen for our future. At noon, Yoichi gave me a folded letter. It was tied with a ribbon in which was stuck a sprig from a plum tree. Hastily, I tucked it into my sleeve and ran to my room. Once I had closed the sliding door behind me and taken out the letter, I was so afraid of untying the ribbon that I sat there with the letter in my hand for a long time, before undoing it. On a paper faintly tinged with pink, the color of plum blossom, she had written 3 lines. The bud on the plum tree fears to unfurl. It knows the splendor of its petals will fall to earth for others to tread on. Aki, I whispered to myself, not adding the Hime, which is just a title of honor given to a high-born maid. Then I smiled. I felt I already knew the girl and that I could win her. Now to write a poem that would answer hers. I brought out my tools for writing, but the paper I used was of very poor quality, and I felt ashamed of using it. I would have to get some that was better, but first I would have to compose the poem. I set to work immediately, forgetting that I had an appointment with Wada Kansuke. I finally decided on 3 lines, the same length as hers. When the storm comes, it will break the boughs and scatter the petals of the flowers wide. I shall gather them and keep them in my sleeve. The storm I referred to I did not take seriously, yet if Lord Takeda Shingen should die, it would come. Would I be able to protect her? I was very young and gave little thought to what happened tomorrow. What was more important was to find paper of fine quality to serve for my message. I ran to Wada Kansuke, only remembering as I entered the storehouse that I was supposed to have been there some time ago. Some peasants were hauling sacks of millet around, opening for his inspection, so I did not like to ask about the paper. Not until the workman had left and we were alone did I approach him. At first he seemed a little annoyed, guessing almost immediately for my reason for asking for paper. Suddenly he smiled and demanded to know my age. I shall be 20 soon, I think. I blushed, for I felt it shameful that I did not know the day or month when I was born. I had been so young when my parents died. I am not sure. I may only be 19. I laughed to hide my embarrassment. You are lucky. You can choose your own dates for the soothsayers to make a horoscope from, Wada Kansuke grinned. Has Lord Aki-Hime left? I asked. He left before the foam on the messenger's horse had dried. I saw him leave. His face was pale like a winter moon. If Lord Takeda Shingen should die, Lord Katsuyori will be our ruler, I said. Wada Kansuke just shrugged his shoulders, and then, as if he could not bear to talk about it anymore, he asked me to come to his room. Once there, he searched long until he found 2 sheets of very fine paper. He handed them to me, pointing out that, with a smile, that they were large enough to be cut in 2. He did not ask why I wanted the paper, and I could not help but wondering if he knew to whom I was writing. I hurried back to my room and wrote out my poem, then gave it to Yoichi to deliver. The next day I waited all day long, expecting a reply, but none came. The following day Lord Aki-Hime returned. I watched him as he dismounted and entered the castle. To my surprise, I noticed Lord Sakoji among the retinue. Then I understood why I had received no reply to my poem. Aki had not thought it seemly to answer while her father was away. The next day Yoichi brought me her reply, written on plain white paper. The frost that comes out of season will kill the budding flower. Spring, dressed in winter's cloth, leaves no fruit for summer ripeness.